And we are ready to get it rolling with another edition of the A-List podcast. It's A.Sherrod Blakely with Kwani, a top hat Lunis. What's up, girl?
Hey, since
Yes.
you brought up the hat. I know you were going to. My hair isn't done.
It's a different look. So, Kwani, I'm sure don't keep the folks on the edge too long about your new look.
No, it's just my hair.
It's just your hair. Done. Just a hat day.
Now that I'm a TV star, I gotta keep up with appearances. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
She is so not low-key kidding. That's like that humble brag, but not really.
No, I'm not. I'm just joking. Goodness.
These are jokes. What's not a joke is the A-List podcast, which you can subscribe to, download, and all that good stuff on all your podcasting apps. Don't forget the A-List podcast with A.Sherrod Blakely, Kwani, a Lunis. And Kwani, training camp is right around the corner, but if a really good player is supposedly out there, there's a pretty good chance that somehow
the Celtics are rumored.
There's going to be some kind of 6 degrees of separation connected there with the Boston Celtics. And so here we have, we're putting the Bradley Beal to Boston rumors on the shelf for a moment. And then we're just going to put on the table Zach Lavine. From the Chicago Bulls. And that's our good friend Gary Washburn reported that. And again, he's not saying that this is definitely going to happen. He's saying that when the Celtics are looking at some of the top players in the offseason, Zach Lavine is probably someone that they're going to look into potentially pursuing. And I've got some thoughts on this. I do. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
That kind of threw me off guard, to be honest, but I'm curious as to why Brad Stevens thinks he needs more guards on this team. Zach Lavine, I got to think about that. I got to do a little more research.
Well, the thing about Zach Lavine is he's an exceptional scorer. He's one of those guys who's shown the ability to elevate his game. And what he's done the last couple of years, he's not just a big-time scorer. He's a highly efficient scorer. And that's something that if you're Brad Stevens, if you're Ime Udoka, and you're looking at this roster going forward, you absolutely want to have those type of players on your roster. But Zach is going to demand a max contract. And when you have Tatum, you have Brown, you could potentially add a third, but then you got Al Horford who's making, big money. And you've got, Marcus Smart not in that same category, but certainly a sizable amount of income he's making. Zach Lavine becomes a luxury, it feels like. Someone that if you were able to get him, that would be great. And it could position you to be one of the better teams. But I don't see it happening just because I don't think that the Bulls are going to be that dumb and let him walk. He is the best thing they got going. And he's one of the few guys who doesn't seem like they're necessarily chasing that big three dynamic where he's looking to bring in 2 guys that he can play with. He's looking to join someone. He seems like he wants to be an independent leader and let the folks who are paid to put the roster together to do their jobs. But if you're the Celtics, though, I think, again, you kind of like with the Ben Simmons stuff, you have to monitor the situation to see if there is, in fact, an opportunity for you to kind of swoop in and to just really, make some noise. And it will obviously be a major splash type addition to the squad.
Right. I think it'd be foolish, obviously, to not be a part of the conversation altogether. But to your point, when you look at the cap space and then you look at the amount of time that he'll be playing, will he be willing to not be a starter, come off the bench and still drop 20 per game for the Celtics? Or is he better off in Chicago or in another city where, like you said, he can be that independent scorer and kind of do his own thing versus now he's going to be not even third in line, like 4th or 5th when it comes to scoring for this team.
Yeah. And Zach ain't trying to go there.
Exactly. It doesn't seem like it.
Right. And for those, right. And for those who aren't familiar with kind of his backstory, he was at UCLA at a time, and he wasn't there very long. Mm-hmm. And he was playing as someone who was coming off the bench. And for those of us who follow his career going all the way back to UCLA, it didn't make a whole lot of sense because he has sick hops and athleticism. And you're watching him play and you're seeing his minutes limited. And you realize that he's playing, in essence, behind the coach's son. Steve Alford's son was on that team. And Zach has never publicly gone at them about that, but it bothered me because I'm thinking like this brother can ball, and why
Right.
is he doing the same thing I'm doing too often, which is watching the damn game?
Right.
And so I wasn't surprised to see him become a solid NBA player. But the one thing, and I mentioned this earlier, that has been probably the biggest revelation is his efficiency. He showed early on once he got to the NBA that he could score, but he's doing it at a ridiculously high clip. He was in the conversation as a 50, 40, 90 guy last year in terms of his field goal shooting, three-point shooting, and what he does from the free throw line. That's the type of guy that becomes a major problem for opponents because of his ability to, again, score in a multitude of ways. And one of my big concerns with him was his defense. I thought that was something that and I think back to Marcus Smart has told me this, and pretty much anyone who's an elite defender has mentioned this, that being a good defender is not a talent thing, it's an effort thing. You don't have to be someone who can just have savant-like instincts when it comes to things on the defensive side of the ball. It's simply wanting to be a good defender. And I thought for the first time since I've been watching Zach, when he was with the Olympic team, I thought he actually wanted to be a good defender. And I think part of that is the Popovich system relies heavily on your ability to guard your yard. Pops is not trying to put cats out there who can just get buckets. Those guys don't last long in Pop's system. You look at the guys that have thrived, they don't exactly go out there and get buckets. That's why I would love to see what a James Harden coached by Popovich for a full NBA season will look like, because Harden, that's what he does. He gets buckets.
Fun to watch, yeah.
But he has shown the ability to drop dimes as well, and he would obviously have to lean on that part of him more so. But the point is, Zach Lavine is at a point in his career where he's shown the potential to be a significant piece to a really, really good team. It's just a matter of, can Chicago put the pieces around him and make that happen, or will he have to find greener pastures elsewhere? And if you're the Celtics, you certainly want to keep your antennas raised for the possibility of swooping in, because, again, I don't see that happening in the offseason next year, but stranger things have happened. And so that's, if you're a Celtics fan, that's something certainly to keep your eyes open and ears, antennas up for. So, but speaking of Zach Lavine, speaking of Bradley Beal, there may come a situation where the Celtics might have potentially an opportunity for either one of those guys. You only got one spot. You can only take one of them. Who you got, Kwani?
Oof. Wow. Okay, now I'm going to sound like a hypocrite for still being shocked that Zach Lavine was even being considered, but I would go with him because I'm still not sure exactly how that dynamic of Bradley Beal. Well, this is a tricky scenario because if the Celtics were to get Bradley Beal, that would mean that Jaylen Brown probably wouldn't be in the conversation anymore. So now I'm backtracking.
Look at you. Looking like Coach Sanders in his prime, in that back pedal.
Call me coach.
Yes, Coach Sanders.
Right. When it comes down to it, I think you always you want a Bradley Beal on your team. But I think with me, at least, I overthink it. Like, how are they going to work out? How's the chemistry going to be on this team? I think either way, if you get Bradley Beal in that Celtics locker room, you can't go wrong. But if you want to keep a Jaylen Brown type,
get off the fence, pick one. Get off the fence, pick one.
I'm giving you both options and explaining why they both work.
I don't want both options. I want Kwani's options. Pick one.
I'm taking Bradley Beal.
Damn. Okay. All right.
Yeah. You couldn't let me just walk around the answer.
No. This is not your neighborhood neighborhood park. No, you got to pick a lane and run in that lane, Kwani. I'm gonna look, if those two were both available, I would probably go with Zach Lavine, and I'm gonna tell you why. Zach is a little bit younger. Zach is a little bit bigger in terms of height. I think Zach has a little bit more versatility, and the difference in terms of score really isn't that dramatically different. And as I pointed out earlier, Zach Lavine is becoming a much more efficient scorer. And so that, to me, lends itself to someone who can play a multiple of roles and still be impactful in those roles because of that level of efficiency. And again, the biggest knock I've had against Zach, and most people do, is his defense. And I thought when he was with the Olympic team, that was some of the best defense I've seen Zach Lavine play as a pro. And that gives me hope and confidence that if you put him in a situation where he's surrounded by top shelf, at least better talent than what we've seen him play with in Chicago, he can rise to the occasion, become an impact player, and put the Celtics in position to really compete at the highest of levels. And that's a big if he becomes available. I think, like I said, if Chicago's smart, and it's debatable about that question, you don't let a guy that good go. You don't let a guy that young, that talented, that impactful go, particularly when you know the market for him isn't going to be that. He's going to get the max contract wherever he goes. And so that you can't get into one of those back and forth trying to squeeze, trying to save a buck or two. He's going to get the most available to him no matter where he goes. And so if you're Chicago, money should not be the issue. The issue for you has to be, do we feel that this is a player that when we look at our team going forward and we look at how we're going to compete at the highest levels, does he fit into what that image looks like? And I would say yes, because again, all the things I've stated already, but Chicago, I don't know how they're going to, I just don't know how they're going to treat him. And to a lesser extent, we don't know whether Zach Lavine is going to be down with the NBA power play movement where he calls his own shots. You know, we've seen it with Harden. You know, we've seen it with lots of players recently where they've made the decision that they are going to put their thumb on a scale, on the trade market scale, to get to a certain destination. And so we don't know if he's going to be another player along that line of thinking, but my gut tells me he won't, that he will, you know, he'll just give Chicago every chance to keep him in the fold long term. And if they hint that they may not want to do that, then he'll get a wandering eye. Because to me, Zach Lavine, he's like that soon to be single supermodel. You may not like me, but I know because of who I am, somebody will. So if I want to boo you up and you like, I don't know, that's okay. Because I'm going to get booed up somewhere else. So Zach is going to be all right no matter what he does because he's that good a player. His track record has been a steady incremental increase in terms of his ability to impact games. And again, he's in that position that all NBA players want to be in, where you know you're going to get the most allotted for you. It's just a matter of who's cutting that check.
That's a good point.
So now, Trader Brad. It seems every week we're talking about Brad in the trade, and this is one that was already done. This was one that basically it became official this week, and we're talking about Juan Hernangomez coming from Memphis for Chris Dunn, Carson Edwards, and swapping of second-round picks. Now, knowing all the particulars of the deal, I mean, is this a deal that you feel good about? Do you like this deal? Is it meh? I mean, what's your emotional attachment or detachment to this deal?
I definitely don't have any attachment to the deal, but I felt bad for Chris Dunn, whose short-lived career in Boston.
This is where he wanted to always be.
Right, exactly. That's something that he had, I think, like, obviously being a local kid, had always wanted to be in this area. But I think Juan I can't even say his name quickly as I want to.
Juan
but I think
Gomez.
I was trying to say his name quickly, but it didn't work the way that I planned. So, tried to roll the letters.
Blame it on the head, Kwani. Just blame it on the head. Just blame it on the head.
Exactly. I think it's a good pickup for the Celtics, coming from Denver and that atmosphere, and I think the motivation to win is something that when you look at players that are coming from good markets or good teams, you always want that in Boston. When you're looking at the way that Brad has been building his roster, he's been building with highly motivated, highly talented players. Not that every player isn't talented, obviously, but seeing him on the Celtics, obviously I would want to see how he works with this lineup, but I do think it's a an interesting pickup. And knowing the way that Brad looks at the game, again, going back to our other talks of his trades and the moves that he's made so far, it's clear that he's building a team that wants to be successful. So I just have to see it all play out now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, again, he did some pretty good things. I thought, in his last stint with Minnesota, where he, his scoring, it is what it is. He's a stretch big, which the Celtics obviously have that as a need for them going forward. But the one thing about him that I think is interesting is he gives them insurance. When you look at that front line where you've got Al Horford, you've got, Time Lord, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to be down at least one of those guys at some point this season. And when you have a guy with experience, you have a guy with a very specific skill set, the ability to stretch the floor, and he's also a good rim runner, which again, that kind of puts him somewhere in between, a Rob, Williams and an Al Horford as far as his skills are concerned. But for me, it's just about having options. Because, I mean, the Celtics, you're not going to put together a team that's going to just on paper overwhelm anyone. You're going to have to beat teams in waves. You're going to have to beat teams with your depth. That is your superpower if you are the Boston Celtics, the ability to impact the game on different levels with different players at different moments. And he fits into that paradigm for the Celtics because, again, he has something that very few of their players have. One guy who kind of falls under the stretch big. Well, he does. He falls under the stretch big category is Luke Kornet. And he will be back reportedly with an Exhibit 10 contract, as will young Juwan Morgan, who was with the Utah Jazz last season. But I want to focus on Luke Kornet for a minute. And believe me, this will be like the most time we will ever spend talking about Luke Kornet. I'm pretty damn sure of that. But Luke, he's a stretch big, and we give him lots of props for being a stretch big. But when you start looking at the numbers, Luke's numbers are not that impressive. He's shot less than 30% from three-point range the last couple of years that he's been in the league. And it's not like he's been in the league that long. He's been in the league like 3 or 4 years total. I think the Exhibit 10 contract, which is basically a training camp invite where more likely than not, Exhibit 10 guys going to wind up like Taco did his rookie season, play a lot of games in Maine. That'll be a good thing for Luke because I think Luke shows some signs of promise and people latch onto that. But when you look at his whole body of work, he really didn't shoot the ball that well.
Yeah. Do you think it's just because of his size? Literally outside on the floor.
Yeah, I think he's intriguing because he's a 7-footer who has three-point range and doesn't look forced. Like, I remember when Al Horford was making the transition to being a three-point shooter, and he'd sit in the corner and he'd get that little two-hand set shot thing and it would be like he looked so robotic like that. And that's not a knock on Al. It's just that he wanted to make sure that his physical mechanics were perfect and identical every single time out. And Luke is a little different. Luke just let it fly because he's a natural long-range shooter who just so happens to be 7 feet tall. But I need to see him shoot a little bit better in the G League with Maine and in opportunities to get with the Celtics. Because right now, there really isn't a lot to be thrilled about with him as far as his long-range shooting. Because, again, we can't just say, well, the eye test tells me one thing, and at the same time say, well, analytics tell me one thing. The numbers are very different. He shoots less than 30% from three-point range. And it'll be interesting to see how he develops and whether he has a role, even if it's a bit role, with the Celtics this year.
Mm-hmm.
I love this little game that they're playing down in Houston, where we are working with John Wall to get a trade done. And in the meantime, he's going to be around the team, but he's not going to play. So let me get this straight. I got a contract that has more than $91.7 million left on it after this season. But for now, I get to chill, practice a little bit, and still get paid.
Like, sign me up too.
What a life. Here's the thing about the John Wall trade talk. There can't be a trade. I can't see any scenario realistically where a team is going to give up real assets to bring in John Wall. And listen, John Wall is a very, very good player. Very good player when he's healthy. And hit you with some numbers. And this is how just my own real cookies on the bottom of the shelf data and analytics of John Wall's situation. Last 4 years, one season he did not play at all due to an injury. The other 3, he played 32 games, 41 games, and 40 games. You are not putting major collateral on the table to bring in a guy with that track record. You're just not going to do it. I think ultimately what's going to wind up happening is they're going to say, look, John, we're trying to trade you, but nobody wants you at that price tag. We're going to have to do a buyout. You're going to have to leave some money on the table. And I know John, like most of us, he ain't trying to leave no cookie crumbs on the table when he put that, you see that big loaf? He ain't trying to leave no crumbs. He's trying to get the whole damn loaf if he's walking out the door. I don't think he's going to have a choice. I think, and you know, the difference between him and Chris Paul, because some people will draw and say, well, Chris Paul was able to be traded. Why couldn't John Wall? Here's the difference. Chris Paul has a track record before he got to Phoenix of being a leader. He had a track record before he got to Phoenix to being someone who made his teammates better. You look at Chris Paul's record. I mean, I think 4 out of the 5 teams that he played for had averaged at least 8 more wins with him than they did the year before he arrived. John Wall doesn't have that kind of track record. When people think about John Wall, they think about the Dougie. They think about his dance. That's what they think about with John Wall. 5 All-Star appearances, that's nice. Yeah. The Dougie, that's nice.
But what do you bring into the table?
And specifically, what I'm going to have to bring to the table to get you in my kitchen. I mean, 2 years, $91.7 million left after this year. That's a significantly high amount of money.
That was good. Good catch.
I was thinking about a certain load.
There are children.
Yes, they are. And they should want to be like John Wall because he about to get paid. I mean, we saw that happen with Al Horford in when he was in Oklahoma City, where they basically paid him just chill and babysit the kids. I mean, that's really what Al's job was. And John ain't trying to be a babysitter. John trying to be a player. He's trying to be in the basketball streets, and I get that. But bruh, that contract, it's going to be incredibly difficult to move. I would be shocked if they're able to move that. But he's going to be desperate. Well, let me put it this way, Kwani, and we talked about this. John Wall may very well be the first and only superstar player in the last 5 to 10 years who was clearly available and not a peep was heard from Celtics fans. They want none of that. Yeah. They want none of that. And it has nothing to do with having, Richardson and Marcus Smart and Peyton Pritchard and everything to do with that money, y'all. The role that he'd have to play, the role that you would be bringing him in, it's not about whether he can do it. It's about can he stay upright enough to do it. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yikes.
Yeah. But that alone would be like kind of a big talking point in the NBA. But for my money, for my attention, I really enjoyed the Russell Westbrook. And for those who aren't familiar with the Russell Westbrook talk, here's just a quick look at what we're talking about. This is the clothing that Russell Westbrook wore for New York City.
We got graphics, y'all.
Yeah, exactly. And this was the talk town, and because obviously he's wearing a skirt. Some say no, it's a kilt. Well, no, it's really it's a man's skirt.
Irish, yeah.
Yeah, so let's call it what it is. And this, as you can imagine, sent Twitter a frenzy. I've seen some memes that have been pretty damn hilarious. I should have gave it to our producer. I got one meme that had him in a Lakers skirt on a basketball court. It's hilarious. That one is out there somewhere in the Twitter sphere. But I mean, I've got 1,000,001 thoughts on this, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on Russell and his once again stand out-ish attire.
Yes. I mean, for one, that's not something that we should be surprised about. He has always loved to push the buttons, so to speak, when it comes to fashion and really just be unapologetic about the things that he wears. For him, obviously, this is a statement in itself because it already caused so much conversation. But when you look at the landscape of the NBA, when it talk about fashion, music, the NBA fashion and music are all synonymous, I think, at this point. You look at the way players have treated both the WNBA and NBA when the way they treat their rivals, it's like a runway. So for him to step out at Fashion Week, step out at the VMAs, just step out in general and really make these kind of statements is not anything that's new for the NBA, but I do think people need to catch up with the times and just accept the fact that, one, these players have money to afford these high fashion brands, and they have these stylists that work with them to create their looks. So why not use the money that you have to really create a brand in that way as well? Because basketball is going to end eventually. Why not invest in other interests?
Yeah, and to your point, Kwani, this is very on brand for Russell
Right.
Westbrook. And that to me is why I'm all for this, because he's being consistently who he is. He's being authentically Russell Westbrook.
Right.
Russell has no problem pushing the.
I don't care what you gotta say.
Well, he has no problem pushing whatever your limits are in terms of what should or should not be done. And I respect the hell out of that. I don't always agree with it, but I absolutely respect it. And I think most NBA heads respect that as well. Because here's the thing: no matter what Russell Westbrook wears on Fashion Week, when the ball goes up, he's still trying to bust your ass.
Right.
And more times than not, he does. And so to me, as a basketball player, this for me yet another reminder: basketball players are more than just basketball players. They have things that are frankly going on in their lives that go above and beyond just dribbling the basketball and making layups and shooting threes. They have a life that exists outside of their profession, just like most of us have a life that exists outside of what we do professionally. And the only difference is that Russell's professional life and personal life are both on a more grander stage and on display than your average citizen. But this is, I mean, when I saw this, I was just like, okay. And it did, like, let's just listen up a little bit. If, let's say, this were Jason Tatum instead of Russell Westbrook, that would have raised some eyebrows for me, because that's a very bold statement that Russell is making from a fashion standpoint, and that's not really Tatum doesn't really make bold demonstrative fashion statements. That's not what he does. It has nothing to do with the skirt and everything to do with how that individual carries themselves and how that they perpetuate their brand in any way, shape, or form. But for Russell, this is very on par with what he does, who he is, and what he's about. And I find it interesting that there's some Lakers fans who had a little pushback on that.
They always have something to say
with that. And I guess that, to me, again, that's part of the Russell Westbrook brand. He's comfortable with being uncomfortable. And more specifically, he enjoys and finds comfort in making others uncomfortable. And I love that about Russell Westbrook. From a basketball standpoint, I think he's too big a shot chucker. I don't think he's very efficient. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's a hell of a player. And this statement is such a Russell Westbrook fashion statement.
Has anyone done a full feature on his relationship with fashion from his perspective? I would want to read that and really just get a sense of what inspires him to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's been asked about that, obviously, many times, and just trying to remember some of the things he said. Essentially, he is saying a lot of things that I'm saying now, and that is that he's more than just a basketball player. That their interest in him, the interest that he has, that go above and beyond that. And I just like the fact that he's consistent with that. Like, if Russell Westbrook showed up at Fashion Week wearing like khaki pants and a polo shirt, you'd be like, "Whoa, what happened to you?
You run out of money?"
Yeah, What did you do with Russell Westbrook? Because this ain't you. I mean, this isn't like one of those Cliff Paul commercials. No, this would be something radically different if he went that route. So I love the fact that Russell, at the end of the day, has been and I think always will be authentically Russell. Love it or leave it. So now, speaking of love it or leave it, I went to Syracuse.
Did you now? Oh my God, this is
I absolutely love me some Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah. Okay, I read you. Yeah, okay, we're on good terms.
So
this is okay.
Carmelo just dropped his memoir yesterday or Tuesday, and I had a chance to get an advanced copy. It's like literally sitting right next to me.
Show us. Nice.
And it's a good book. It's better than I thought, to be candid with you.
What's the title for those who are listening?
Where Tomorrows Aren't Promised, written with D. Watkins. It's Carmelo's memoir, a memoir of survival and hope. But the cool thing about this book, and to me, it's one of the things I really like about most memoirs, is that there should be something that I learn about you that I didn't know. There should be something that I learned about you that I didn't know that I can relate to. And I thought he did a really good job of explaining about some of the challenges that he had coming up, specifically some of the bouts of depression that he had to deal with, and some of the recurring themes of death to those he's close to. He talks about, his stepfather passing, his stepfather dying, his father, dying shortly after he was born, cousins, other family members. And, the one thing that he talked about, and him and I, we talked about this specifically, was how back then there really wasn't talk about depression. You just dealt with it. You just figured out how to survive. He talked about that a lot. So I thought it was a really, really good book. And certainly when I think about, sports books that I'm reading, because, Miriam Fader's book on Giannis Antetokounmpo, Gary Washburn and Mark Spears, their Spencer Haywood book. That's one I've read that a couple times now. And then Carmelo Anthony's memoir is another one in that genre of books that I definitely would recommend. And it's a quick read. It's like maybe 250 pages. So you can knock it out in a fairly short amount of time. But speaking of short amount of time,
wait, but you're just gonna breeze over your Ebony magazine interview?
We're gonna get into that later.
About it.
We can get into it right now since you brought it up.
Yeah, I'm like, why would you?
I did do a sit down with Carmelo Anthony where we did talk about the book, and we also talked about the Los Angeles Lakers. Yeah. And it's interesting how he sees that seasoned group coming together, and seasoned in our conversation had multiple meanings. Like when I think of seasoned, I think of aged, old, veteran. And then Carmelo hit me with a different kind of seasoned analogy where he was talking about how when you go to like an Italian restaurant and you have a great meal and you look back and the woman behind in the kitchen is like 900 years old. And no,
he literally said that 900
years old. And the food is good.
Yeah.
And he said, that's how me and his crew, we're all in the kitchen. And the food, our play, is going to be good. And I started thinking about it, and I said, well, I would love to roll with that analogy because I love Melo. That's my dude. But I can't. There's a difference between having wisdom and being old. Like when you are wise, based upon experience, then that wisdom can be translated to whatever profession that you have. If you've been in the newspaper game for like 20, 30 years, and now you are a managing editor, that experience, that wisdom will benefit you. But if you are someone who uses their body from a physical standpoint, Father Time is not your friend. Father Time is not trying to hook you up at the end of the road. Father Time is trying to take you out at the end of the road. And Melo, and I love you to death, one of the all-time great scorers to ever play in the NBA, Father Time has slowed you down a little bit. Same thing with LeBron, same thing with DeAndre, same thing with pretty much, 60, 70% of that roster. And that, to me, is where they have to figure out a way to pull the okey doke on Father Time, to get him to think that the time is not now for him to cash in his Father Time's chip. Because Father Time got chips on all of us. At some point, he's cashing them all in, and we are going to lose. We are going to lose. And the challenge that Melo has and the rest of those Lakers is figuring out how to Jedi mind trick Father Time into giving them at least one shot to get it done. And as much as I would love for him, to go Chef Melo RD in the kitchen and cook up some good stuff, it's just I just don't see it happening. And I wish him all the individual success out there. I don't want the Lakers to be successful. I don't want to see them win.
Just Carmelo.
Let me be clear about that. I don't want to see them do well. I do want to see Melo do well. But in part because I just don't think that team, I just don't think that they have that balance that you need to have between having good players, young players, old players,
wise players.
Yeah, they don't have balance. And I would love, and being here in Boston, I would hate for them to have more championships than the Celtics. That's just being real.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
It especially when I think about how close the Celtics came within the last 4 or 5 years of getting to the finals. And once you get to the finals, anything and everything can happen. I think back to that Game 7 against Cleveland at the TD Garden, where Terry Rozier struggled, Tatum struggled, Jalen struggled. It was the worst game those young fellas had in the playoffs ever. And that was such a missed opportunity. Because you never know, again, what happens once you get to the finals. But, like I said, we'll find out how good the Lakers are and how good the Celtics are and the other 28 teams in the association when training camp starts in a couple of weeks. And how you feeling about training camp?
I'm excited. I'm excited as if I'm going to be there, but I'm not going to be running drills. But I am just very much looking for one. I'm just excited for basketball to return. The fact that we've been able to have something to talk about every week during this off season is amazing. But I want to talk about some actual basketball and also be able to see this roster that Coach Stevens, see, he still got me. Trader Stevens has gotten together and see what Coach Udoka is able to do with that roster. I say this every year, but I'm always of the mindset of like, when a new season starts, we talk about potential a lot, but it's exciting to get to that point where you can actually see all of the things you talked about in the off season, whether or not they come into play.
Yeah, I'm excited just to see the new guys. I'm always excited about the new guys because and the Celtics, for a lot of us, like when we see Peyton Pritchard, for a lot of media, it may be like the first time you've actually seen Peyton Pritchard in person.
Yeah.
And he's been a guy that we've talked a lot about, but not many of us have seen him. And I was fortunate to be around him a little bit in Vegas before, while the Celtics were out there. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious to see the new guys, and I'm really curious to see jacked up Tatum.
I think that photo was a little exaggerated by everyone.
I know it was a little exaggerated, but you know what? Here's the thing. Oh, the Kwani eye roll. I ain't seen that in a while.
I know, but it's just like the way people reacted. I was just like, are y'all really serious right now?
Here's the thing. And for those of us who have at some point worked out, okay, you can absolutely get to a point in your workout where you're looking jacked up. Because you're, again, everything is relative to the camera angle. And Tatum, much props to Tatum and his photos, his social media.
Hit those angles for him, yeah.
Listen, those are photos that when you are like 65 years old and your grandson is talking about pop, they said you was kind of nice. They said you had a little game. They said you put in a little bit of work. Did you really put in work? And
Look right here, son.
Be like, come here, son. Come here, boy. Pull up his
summer 2021. You couldn't even go outside.
Pull up his iPhone 64.
64. It might be at like 1,000.
Exactly. And it'd be like, look at this. You see them guns? You see them guns, son? That's what I'm talking about.
Armed and dangerous.
Yes. And then little boy be like, Dad, Pop, I didn't know you had it like that. Damn. Exactly. Those are priceless photos that Tatum should absolutely hold on to for the rest of his life. Because whenever anybody say, I don't really know how thick Tatum was, bam, check it out, check it out, check it
He needs
out.
the before and after too. He needs his rookie year and then that photo next to each other because he was skinny.
Yeah, I was a little nervous for him when I first met him.
Same. I was like, they're gonna break this kid.
Because the first time I met Tatum was right after they drafted him, and he did the community service thing. I can't remember where it was. And him and I went off to like an area, and we were just kind of talking one-on-one. And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking like, bruh, I'm glad we inside, because if we were outside and the breeze came through kind of potent,
stop,
you might not be standing where you at. He was standing as can be. But the thing that I love about Tatum, though, and I told him this one time, I don't think he probably doesn't remember, but I told him that he reminds me, from a physical standpoint, of Tayshaun Prince. And the thing about Tayshaun Prince was ridiculously skinny, but was strong, had that wiry strength. And Tatum, I think, is along those same lines. But the difference is that Tatum is bulking up to have not just wiry strength, but grown ass man strength.
Yeah.
Whereas, Tayshaun, he's good. He was good. And Tayshaun, he's been retired for like almost a long time. And he looks pretty much the way he did when he came to the league back in 2001 or 2, whatever. Tatum ain't gonna be that though. Tatum is bulking up for the long haul.
He's only 23.
I know. He's still exactly. He's still young pup. Got to pay that extra whenever he gets a rental car. I remember that a couple years ago. But I'm looking forward to seeing Tatum. I'm looking forward to seeing Jalen, see what he can do and what he can't do. And really, I want to get the games going because I want to see Udoka in action. I want to see the way he mixes the lineups. I want to see him in those, ATO after timeout situations to see what he's drawing up. I want to see him, come up with ways that put his indelible imprint on this team. I don't want us to be looking at him and thinking like, damn, that looks a lot like what Brad would do. I don't want to see that. That defeats the whole purpose of having a new coach. If you're going to do the same thing the old coach did, what's the point? So I'm looking. There's so much to be excited about, and the fact that we only got a couple more weeks before we get it going again.
Oh, it just patience is a virtue.
That's what I'm talking about. So, Kwani.
Yes.
Let's see, the mayoral stuff is starting to kind of wind down a little bit now. It's shifting a little bit. So
the primaries are over. Kim Janey is not going to be considered. She was the acting mayor. So right now, if you're in Boston, Anissa Sabi George and Michelle Wu are your finalists for the 2021 mayoral. I tried to make that sound like basketball, but it did not work. But those are the final 2 mayoral candidates. But they kept saying we're going to the finals, and I was like, that's not what that means in my head. But
no,
I digress. They're going to the final ballot. If you live in Boston, do your research, dig into the candidates, see who aligns with your platforms, and go vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, as Kwani, we kind of touched on. I did a one-on-one Q&A with Carmelo Anthony. We talked about his book and also the Lakers. Like I said, I wish him to have a good season. I hope the Lakers don't. Just real.
However that works.
Also, spent some time talking with Donovan Mitchell about some of the things that he's been involved with. One thing in particular that he has been actively engaged in is helping out teachers. His mother is a teacher, and one of the things he did. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
It is crazy. It is very crazy.
Shout out to all the teachers. My dad teaches kindergarten as well, and I don't know how they did it during the pandemic. On Zoom, talking to these little kids.
Right. And Donovan, him and I, we talked a little bit about that, about just watching his mom teaching these kids on Zoom, and he's just like, what?
How
do you do that?
Mind you, she probably doesn't even have to do this job, but she's doing
There's no probably about it. She don't.
I know, but I didn't want to assume and just said probably. I'm not gonna just assume.
She's doing it. She's teaching because she genuinely loves to teach.
Wow.
She's definitely not doing this for no damn paycheck.
Right.
We know that. But Donovan, he teamed up with Clorox, and they basically put together $1 million to give to teachers to help them fill out their classrooms for this upcoming school year, which is a great thing because
Wait, where do I sign my dad up?
The link is in the story.
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm gonna go back.
But he, the cool thing is, and again, this is just, he's a good guy. It's hard to find people who are hating on Donovan.
You could tell he's a good guy.
Yeah. And it's funny because we talked about basketball, obviously, and just Utah season didn't end quite how they thought it would. And he said all the right things to the Lakers. They made some changes. They got a good team, and he said, but we got a good team too. We've added some players, and we plan to just keep getting better. And he talked about parts of his game that he wants to work on and enhance to get better at. And it was a good time. He's a good dude. So I always enjoy having those type of conversations with NBA players to just have conversations about something other than just your ability to knock down 3-point shots.
Right.
I mean, there's more than that. So that was a good time. That was a really good time.
For A.Sherrod Blakely, I'm Kwani A. Lunis. Thank you for listening and subscribing and giving 5 stars to the A-List podcast. We'll be back here next week.